Okay, welcome everyone, and thanks so much for your patience as we got this session started. We are kicking off our Achieving Place Space Equity in Baltimore panel and are very excited that you are spending part of your afternoon with us. So thank you again for joining us. We're going to focus in today on a specific project with a school in Baltimore and also across city schools in Baltimore. How did we partner on a place-based assessment to try and achieve place-based equity across city schools in Baltimore? So I'll start us off with introductions, and then we'll hear from all of our panelists and get into some of the details of the assessment and project work that we've done together. So welcome again. My name is Kathryn Lusk. I am here from KABOOM. I'm our Senior Director of Programs, and KABOOM is a national nonprofit. We're committed to ensuring that every kid in every community has access to an amazing place to play. So our work is prioritized around place-based equity and informed by a commitment to racial equity. And that means that we work to identify where places to play are needed most, and we partner with kids, community members, and a really diverse range of partners to build kid-designed play spaces. The community-centered approach that we go through is about ensuring that play spaces that we build together really reflect the needs and wants of the kids who are using them, the community members of all ages who are using them, and really feel like safe and welcoming spaces. So my role here at KABOOM is to lead the team that directly manages community-built place-based projects. And as we go through and introduce ourselves, we're talking about place-based equity in Baltimore. So LaDacia, Lynette, and I will tell you about ourselves, about our organizations, and we'll also share with you both a challenge and an opportunity that we see for kids in Baltimore. So the challenge that I'll lift up in Baltimore is really the reason that the organization I work for exists. It's that not every kid in Baltimore lives in a place where there are great, safe, freely accessible outdoor play spaces, either in neighborhoods, publicly accessible, or in schools where they're spending the bulk of their days learning. Play is an incredibly critical developmental necessity, and it is a challenge for not all kids to be able to easily get to a place to play without friction in their lives. On the flip side, I do think an opportunity in Baltimore and elsewhere really is an increased focus on outdoor spaces, coming from how the COVID-19 pandemic really reshaped all of our lives. So something that may not have gotten the attention and focus in previous years is starting to have new audiences, new people really caring about and thinking about how do kids and people of all ages really spend time outside together, have safe spaces together. So I think that's a positive opportunity in Baltimore and elsewhere. So let's continue our introductions and go to Lynette. If you can introduce yourself next, sharing yourself, your organization, and also one challenge and one opportunity that you see for kids in Baltimore.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kathryn. So my name is Lynette Washington. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Baltimore City Public Schools. I oversee our operations team, which includes our facilities team. And so our facilities team is the one who provides a lot of oversight of any facility improvements on site in buildings and some of those different places. I think that it's a really great question to ask what's a challenge and an opportunity for our students. And I think that one of the challenges that I see from sitting in my seat is that a lot of the public service organizations and entities that are to directly serve Baltimore City students tend to be under-resourced, under capacity, not fully funded in order to support our students the way that we want to. So I would say like the school system, parks and recs in the city, a lot of them are struggling. We struggle with the funds in order to do what we really want to do for Baltimore City school students. And I think that one of the opportunities is this partnership that we have with KABOOM, where you have other external partners who have access to some of those resources that may be more direct and focused within particular areas. And when that partnership is done right, and we're connected to those partners who can directly address those need gaps, I think that it becomes very helpful and resourceful for our students. And then not only that, a lot of the partners come with the passion of wanting to see our students thrive and succeed. So I think that the partnership is one of the opportunities for our students.
Thanks so much, Lynette. LaDacia, you want to introduce yourself next?
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is LaDacia Ballard. I am the principal at Fermanagh Templeton Preparatory Academy. We serve students in grades pre-K through 5. At our school, it is our mission to accelerate the opportunities of all of our students by expecting nothing but excellence from student, staff, and the community. I would identify one lift or a challenge that we need to continue to work on, particularly for my school community, the effects on crime and poverty on individuals, as well as the healthy structures of families and community systems like schools, churches, and other organizations. I will also speak briefly on our community partners and schools being not only underfunded, but what I like to call underpowered. And so that's this challenge in schools to have the people and the quality of people that's necessary to make sure that we are working efficiently and effectively. Despite those challenges, I firmly believe that education still continues to be one of the opportunities for students, as well as their families and overall community partners, as a way to improve individuals and schools.
Thank you both so much. And it really is the district, the school, and KABOOM as a nonprofit that work really closely together for these partnerships to be successful. So, we're talking about place-based equity. We've introduced ourselves, a little bit about who we are and kind of what brings us to this session with you today. We want to get grounded in the content of the session through a little bit of a fun question as we think about play as an important priority for kids and community members of all ages. And we're just going to spend a minute with each of us talking about why joy is important for kids. And I think we'll stick with the same order as last time, if that works for everybody. And we'll note that for me, joy is a release, right? Kids are really impacted by stress that's coming at them from their peer group, but also from all of the adults in their lives. And play is just a break to be totally self-directed, to be physically and emotionally exuberant. And it is a critical part of, should be a critical part of every day. So that's, for me, why joy is so important for kids.
So I will go next. I have 4 little people, and so watching them experience joy, what resonates for me and for just children in general, I think that is that place of innocence, where children get to develop all those skills that they're going to need. And when they get older, they get to develop their imagination, inquiry, asking questions of how and why. And I think that it's very important for children when they have to, grow and develop to deal with the complexities of the world around them. So having that, as Kathryn said, that place of release, to just be able to explore and be children, I think is very important.
I think that joy is important for students and kids the same way it's important for adults, in that it really helps us create and maintain mental and physical health for all of the reasons that you guys already suggested, but also making sure that students have that experience of joy, which then to me leads to hope. So if you can find joy and peace throughout your days, then when those struggles and challenges come, you know that it exists. Yeah. And I think that that's very important for students, not only in their development, but in their understanding of how to maneuver mentally and physically as individuals in a challenging world.
I love that. Well, we're grounded in the why of what we're doing. I'll take us now into a little bit of the how and share some of the background on the place-based assessment that City Schools and KABOOM conducted together in 2019 and 2020. That's informing the work that we're doing together now. So my goal is that we go over the recent place-based assessment and talk about what did that assessment uncover, what are we trying to get to with it, right? What would it actually mean to be able to say that every kid has equitable access to play where they learn? And what role can we, those of us who are here in this room in this session and others play in making that vision real? So going back to just a tiny bit of background for before we started the assessment, KABOOM and City Schools have built a partnership together over years of community built play spaces in Baltimore. And there is a shared commitment from both of our organizations to looking at the distribution of resources through an equity lens. And I think it's important and helpful that Lynette called out really resource constraints as a key challenge for kids in Baltimore. And I know that's true elsewhere. We have people, joining us from elsewhere too. So thinking about where do we work together, right? We know we have a partnership that's geared toward a vision of every kid being able to play in a safe and vibrant environment where they learn. How do we work together to prioritize that investment so that it goes where it's most needed? And we have data informing us on how do we allocate scarce resources. So prior to 2019, KABOOM and City Schools did do community built play spaces together with really amazing partnerships where we received applications. And those are projects that we're really proud of, and we're glad that we did them together. But we know that for an application to come in, there has to be the information that application exists, getting to the right hands, and then either staff or parent capacity to be able to complete it and kind of move through the process. So we decided that if we did a place-based assessment together, which is what we embarked on in 2019, we would much more equitably be able to focus our joint projects together where they're most needed. So in 2019, 2020, KABOOM and City Schools visited 54 schools. And I'll note, I'm not talking about every single school within the whole City Schools system. We're focusing on elementary age schools that we didn't already build a playground together at, and that weren't already slated through a different means to get a playground. So if there's any confusion over those numbers, it's a smaller slice of the total City Schools elementary schools. And when we looked at these 54 schools, we found actually, many of them do have playgrounds. Most of them have playgrounds. In fact, across those 54 schools, there were 71 play spaces. So some even had, a couple of playground footprints. But 31 of those 54 schools really needed the play spaces to be replaced based on the physical condition of those play spaces. So, you're talking about 40% of those sites that we're visiting demonstrating great need. And we certainly had anecdotal evidence of need prior to that, but after completing these visits, we were able to say from these physical site visits, we know 40% of these spaces, these schools, need investment to change the physical environment for kids so they're able to play safely and have really, great state-of-the-art equipment, right? That's what every kid should have. So along with that great need, there's, a big opportunity to invest and meet the need across the whole system so that every kid who's learning in City Schools has a great place to play. I do want to share with you that in addition to the physical site visits, the assessment did also incorporate a principal survey so that we would know, where is there strong capacity and interest from school leadership in participating in a community build process? Is it a good fit for that school community? We also looked at student enrollment to understand, what are the numbers of students who are attending these schools, and looked at the community conditions index that City Schools is using to understand what's the context for the community surrounding the school, including socioeconomic factors. So with those different things all combined, the physical site conditions, community conditions index, student enrollment, and principal surveys, we were able to basically create a roadmap together. So for City Schools and KABOOM, where are we going to prioritize the resources that we're able to drive to improving place-based equity? in addition to learning that there's great need at 40% of the spaces that we reviewed together, we did find that of the elementary schools that were prioritized as needing new play spaces, approximately 6% more Black students and approximately 5% more students who qualify for free and reduced price lunch attended those schools than the average across the system. So the students who are most impacted by this infrastructure need, who have less access to great spaces to play, are disproportionately qualified for free and reduced price lunch and are disproportionately Black students. So it's really important that the resources are getting driven to where that need is greatest. And we feel that now we have that blueprint together because we're able to look and say, this is where we need to invest first as we work to fundraise together to find the resources needed to complete this work. So that's a quick overview of the assessment and some of the things that we learned from it. Lynette, LaDeja, anything that you would add to that in terms of what we learned from the assessment?
So I guess like one piece that I want to add is that I think that assessments are helpful because when you have resources, a lot of times it is your more resourced leaders or communities who can advocate more are the ones who tend to access those resources, right? And so when you step back and you do an assessment and you look at it from an equity lens and couple it with any other lenses, you are able to say, okay, this is where the need is greatest. And so yes, we have some folks who are able to navigate the various systems in order to advocate for their communities. But for those individuals who may not know how to navigate the system or may not have all of the resources, you can identify those particular areas and direct the resources to where the greatest need is. And I think that that was helpful. And one of the things that I did when I reviewed the study was that I asked my team to put up that visual map to show like where these locations were and then overlapping them with the community conditions index. I just to build on it, the community condition index looks at economic disparities. It looks at access to resources like identify areas that are the food deserts. And it also looks at neighborhood stability and safety, so that vacancy and crime element. And so those areas that have higher levels of disinvestment, they tend to stick out, right? And so one of the things that the analysis showed is that a lot of our play spaces that are in disrepair or needing to be upgraded tended to be in that particular area. And if anyone is familiar with a lot of the research in Baltimore around the Black butterfly, the food deserts and different things like that. And so it allowed us as an organization who we try to leverage some of our resources. And so some of our partnership with KABOOM had been, how do we use some of our state resources, our state funding, how do we leverage it, right? So we may use some of the funding to do site preparation and some of those different things like that. And so it's helpful for us to be able to say, okay, this is where our greatest need is, and looking at it from an analytical mapping perspective and being able to identify those particular areas instead of us just kind of waiting for school communities who have all of their ducks in a row to come to us and say, we want this to happen, but being able to target all of those individuals who actually have need. So I think that the assessment was very helpful for us, and in our role in our seat, making sure that we're leveraging these limited resources to have the greatest impact for the communities with the greatest needs.
Right, and I think that to piggyback off of what Dr. Washington is speaking of, the schools in these high area needs is not as if the district or the school doesn't see the need, but there's so much need that it's really hard to determine what gets prioritized. And typically when you are a school that, for instance, may be underperforming, you only have but so much amount of time where you can decide what your priorities are. But if you're unable to fix your achievement data typically, right, then you have a different type of monitoring coming in, which then disrupts what you may be identifying as priorities or needs for your school. And so I think that what the study showed also was that, hey, there is a need. This need exists because of so many reasons, And all of these reasons affect so many other categories. So as a school, then it's up to you to decide what's going to be your priority. How do you partner with other school communities? But I think from the principal side, what we need is also consistent partners that can feed other needs beyond state testing or attendance or the other things that we spend a lot of our time and energy trying to address.
Well, I think we'll probably turn our attention now to the project, just by way of transitioning from the focus on kind of what do we learn from the assessment to how did then one project come to life at Ledge School. I will note that the school district is investing, as you noted, through some different funding streams, right, to be able to make a big investment. And then that investment is being paired with community and corporate donations. So there's a constant fundraising effort to be able to find kind of more allies in this cause to help us advance the cause of place-based equity for students in Baltimore schools. And we were able, so early 2020, we completed this assessment together. We knew where we wanted to focus. And we were lucky enough that even in the upheaval of the pandemic, we still had these other partners who came on board with us and said, okay, we know you're not going to be able to implement your model exactly as you did in previous years because everybody's lives are completely upside down right now, but how do we find a way to work differently together in 2020, work safely together in a way that has new physical distancing requirements to still be able to complete a community build where kids inform what the design is going to be. So we were able to work with 5 schools in 2020. And with that, I think let's kind of tell the story of your project, LaDeja, and talk a little bit about how kids were involved, how parents and community members were able to be involved, and just what the project means for kids at Furman Templeton.
All right, so we started the beginning stages. I honestly can't remember exactly when. I think it was pretty much throughout the span of the year. And one of the things I would note firsthand is the efficiency of the program, the management of the project itself. And I'll be honest, it was very detailed. We met almost bi-weekly, and then even more frequently than that as we came closer to the end of the school year and finishing the project. But one of the things that really was a highlight was how families and students could be involved. So when we got to the portion of the planning where we needed to actually start to design the playground, we created a classroom assignment for all of our art classrooms where they would sketch their own dream design. And from there, students submitted their work and it was reviewed by ILT members to determine which was the best of the best. And from that list, then we compiled it and shared it with the rest of the teaching staff as well as our parents during one of our bi-weekly town hall meetings during that school year, where they also had the opportunity to vote on color and design. One thing that we wanted to pay attention to was making sure that it looked different than what students had already been experiencing, just for something new. And an increase in engagement. So after taking a combination of student design ideas, we were able to fully develop our new playground, which we use daily, multiple times throughout the day, as a part of our recess program. I think one group that I definitely missed was our board, because we're a charter school. So we also received feedback from our school board as well to assist with determining the final steps. And then again, plan to open the playground last year, but because of the continuing restrictions around the pandemic, we waited until this school year. Now that students are back in school full time, we incorporated as a part of our recess schedule. So grade levels go out during their lunch shifts, half of their lunch shift to engage with each other, their peers, and participate. I don't know if you want to speak to like I don't know if you want me to speak to the difference I see in the students this year and in comparison to the year prior to COVID. But recess was pretty automatic for students in pre-K and kindergarten. We honestly struggled a lot to implement a full recess programming for all grades in previous years. And so this year we've noticed a decline in our behavioral challenges, especially between peers. We've seen an increase in excitement and even beyond outside of school time, as we're leaving in the evenings, you can almost guarantee that someone will be on the playground, community members or students still playing and meeting there. So it has really had a positive impact on our school environment and the overall health of our students, having the opportunity to burn off that energy, communicate and interact with their peers, and problem solve on a daily basis.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think now might be a good moment for us to share some images, if that's okay with you, LaDeja, and we can ask for some help from the conference team in sharing the screen and clicking through to show some images of what does the drawing look like that came from the kids that need some, limited interpretation. It kind of tells you what they want to see on the playground. And then if we continue to click through, so this is the vision straight from kids of different ages, being able to share what do they want to see. And this is what kind of forms the heart of the design concept. And perfect, as you continue to click through, you can see how does that then get translated, right? And how does this playground hopefully look, different than what might already be installed at other schools or at other neighborhood parks, to be able to show some of those images. And I think with that, we're probably okay to come back to the screen with us unless there's anything specific to those images that either LaDeja or Lynette wants to comment on. Excellent. Well, I know we want to hear your questions or see your questions through chat and want to get to that, but we also want to spend a little bit of time just with what we've learned about those of you who are interested in how do you explore, understand, and address place-based inequity in your own community, or how do you think about place-based projects in relation to improving health outcomes? So just want to share a little bit of advice on those two questions before we open it up to whatever questions you'd like us to address in the time we have remaining in the session. And I'd love to kick us off in just a piece of advice that I think has been spoken to already at a couple points really well in our session. And I love the art classes actually made this an assignment, so every kid was a part of it. But to me, it's just really centering kids in the design process at any point that you're going to be focusing on new infrastructure that's kid-centric, taking the time to spend with them together in community, focused on what do they hope for, what do they dream of, what do they want to see, and it might take some interpretation if the hope for dream is a chocolate fountain and you can't quite do that, but usually there's a way to interpret kind of what's behind the kernels and seeds of the amazing ideas they have. And I think there's really nothing like the experience for a child who's helped to design a playground to really feel safe there, right? I think there's a lot of discussion of having a sense of belonging in shared spaces. And if that shared space has started with a design process that the most important user, in this case, the kids, have participated in, that's the best way to really foster that sense of belonging. So with that, I'd love to ask that question to LaDeja and to Lynette as well.
So I think that one of the things that I would like to add to that, because I think that that's all very much on point with some of the things that I was thinking on, but I think that the other piece is the partnerships and the leadership team, because one thing that Principal Ballard talked about was the time commitment, the ongoing meetings, and then also incorporating it as a part of some of the things that she was doing. So having the students during the art session actually take time and draw out the playground spaces, because I think that whether it's playgrounds for me, libraries, any of those projects where we're working with partners and you're trying to have the students directly engaged into the design visioning process, it has to be a commitment from the school leader, and also the school leader mobilizing the school community to come out and also support and provide their volunteering in some of that. And so that the school community actually owns the project. And so I think that if someone was interested in doing and exploring this in some of their communities, they have to make sure that they're tapping into leaders who are committed and really excited about the project in order to get all of the rest of the pieces to come together.
I would speak to biggest piece of advice, just remembering what we are charged with doing at schools. And, you know, on a day-to-day, we can get very bogged down with the bureaucracy, excuse me, of it all, the deadlines and the paperwork. But that larger circle, and if we're thinking about just education and the work, right, it's really about teaching and learning. And all of those other things are just small circles. So when you have opportunities for students to engage in the development of their communities, to problem solve, to share their thoughts and ideas, then that leads into the other pieces that make the teaching and learning so much more easier. And it helps them manage themselves and their relationships and their social interactions and their social awareness, and you fill in the blank, right? So just making sure that we don't limit our spaces and our programs and our structures to the challenges that we see and the people that are performing at the lowest level, but that through that lens of equity, that we know that everybody deserves to exist in the highest form possible. And when we are not existing in the highest form, then understanding that we have the power to change that, but we also have the right to do so, and that our students have the right to do so. So that's what I would say, you know, everybody keep that in mind, and that would be my advice as you continue to push for increasing the equity, especially around play spaces at your schools and in your communities.
Well, thank you both so much for that. We have been intentional about trying to really hold some space to hear questions from participants or chat questions from participants. So we're at that moment in the session where we're ready to hear your questions. So please, if you haven't already started to submit them through the chat function, please start to do that. And the team from Upswell is going to help us out with getting those to LaDeja and to Lynette and me. I'll just note as a really brief update as your questions are getting formulated and getting sent to us, that when we talk about a community play space build, I think that can take a lot of different forms. So historically for KABOOM as an organization and in our partnership with city schools and others, that has been both community-centered design, where kids' ideas are at the heart of what is the design concept that ultimately is built. And it's also included volunteer participation in building the play space. In 2020, we were, understandably cautious around bringing people from different households together, and things were really evolving throughout the year and, continue to evolve now in terms of what's the right way, safe way to approach public gatherings. So we did professionally install playgrounds in 2020, and now in 2021 have moved back to volunteer installations, but on a smaller scale. So we have fewer people who are interacting and are able to kind of spread out more and keep the whole volunteer event outdoors. So just a kind of a note on where we are in time, and expect all of that to continue to evolve as public health conditions and guidelines, continue to evolve based on changing circumstances. So I'm seeing Katie has shared a question for us, and I think there might be two answers to that, but the question is, I love the data-driven approach as well, and who did you work with for the community condition survey? So Ingrid, thank you so much for that question. I think Lynette, in terms of the community conditions index, I feel like that was the school year 2016, 2017. I don't know, did the school district work with anyone outside of the district, or was it the data team at the district?
It was the data team at the district. So the facility planning team was the one who prepared the index for the district. And there was basically a collaboration with a number of different offices to try to identify how we could basically begin to classify particular neighborhoods so that we can be able to determine how to prioritize resources. So it's a lot of data pooled on communities around neighborhoods, as I said, some of those various factors around economics, neighborhood stability, and some of those other various indicators in order to build the index.
Thank you. And great to see more questions coming in. I think that's a very complete answer, so we can move on to the next one. And so the question here is, when choosing the final sites, did all of the stakeholders in the process determine a decision-making matrix, and was it shared with the wider community? That's a great question. So in terms of the final sites, there was a team from the school district that was meeting with a team from KABOOM to review what is all of the information coming in from the survey, the site visits, the index, and student enrollment. And we did work together to co-author basically a summary and a report and publish it through our website and share it out more broadly. So I think that the easiest way to find it is to go to, actually it's probably to Google search KABOOM Baltimore City Schools Playspace assessment, but it's just posted on our website publicly. So I think that hopefully that answers the question. There might be some things that I missed or didn't quite speak to completely. Anything that you would add to that? And certainly feel free to kind of resubmit if there might be some nuances there, because I do think there's a lot that we can learn from each other in this. The next question that I'm seeing is whether there are plans to do future assessments in other cities. So thank you so much, Tamara, for sharing that question. Absolutely. You know, I think that the more data that we have on what are the current conditions, the better we can partner with organizations, and particularly with school districts and with park systems, to be smart about where are we spending our time, where are we focusing and dedicating resources. I think Lynette spoke to it really well, and LaDeja did too. You know, it's not that there isn't an interest or an acknowledgement of the need, but you know, resources are scarce, and the ability to kind of go after and pursue grants is not unlimited. So basing our partnerships on future assessments is absolutely a part of our vision for how we'll continue to partner in other cities. And we're working right now on looking at some on-site assessments in Port Arthur, Texas, and hoping to get to do that in other places as well. So thanks for that question. And I love, so the next question that I'm seeing, and I think everyone hopefully has visibility to the chat box as we're going through, but is, again, thank you, Ingrid, for this additional comment. Good way to prioritize, and it would be great on a city level and even to compare nationally. I 100% agree. I'm really hopeful that that's something that we're going to have the ability to do, and to really develop a smart, efficient, sustainable kind of living way to compare nationally, right? Because the built environment is not static, it's changing all the time. So both in a positive direction where there's new infrastructure being added, and then in a negative direction where existing infrastructure is damaged or aging out. So having the ability to look at kind of a living assessment and be able to map out nationally kind of where is there strong access to play and where is there not. And there's some really exceptional work that's being done in this area. I think many people who are attending the session are familiar with the Trust for Public Land and the work that they do on parks. We're looking to get a little bit more granular with kind of Playspace specific information in the assessments that we're doing, but would definitely draw your attention to take a look at TPL and strong work that they're doing in park access and understanding where is there really amazing park access and where are there opportunities for cities to be improving their park access. But that's definitely a dream for me as an individual, for my organization too, to have more data to work with across more places for a better comparison, better prioritization. And it looks like right now we don't have any other questions coming in. So if you're feeling a little bit shy, now's a great chance to pop your question into that chat, because there's space for it. You won't be crowding anyone else out. I don't know, we've been a little conscious of time in planning our questions and our prompts. So LaDeja or Lynette, is there anything that we didn't get to that we were maybe trying to hold space for the Q&A that if we've got a little bit of space here, you'd like to lift up and highlight if we don't have another question coming in?
Not that I don't have anything in addition on my end.
Yeah, neither do I.
Excellent. I will note for me something that I think I didn't want to take too much time when we were talking about advice that we have for people who are trying to kind of work toward place-based equity for, you know, their own family, their own community, their own schools. I would say think creatively about how to activate spaces, right? So we built, and we showed you just a few images of this really beautiful, large steel and plastic structure together, right, with rubber surfacing. So that's a major infrastructure project, and we're excited, and we want to do, you know, 25 more of them in the next 5 years to really fully meet the need. But there are ways with a much lower barrier to entry to activate spaces and make them playful that, you know, don't require the same kind of investment. So I'm here to do all the playgrounds that we can together, but also just to encourage people to really seek out some ways to see spaces that are underutilized, that have opportunities to be made more playful through something like a paint installation where you've got prompts that are, you know, simple and playful and age appropriate for kids. There's, you all probably know, but there's so much that you can do even with chalk. If you can't get approval to do something permanent with paint, activating a space temporarily with chalk, or testing something by bringing in kind of a part-term installation that might be really small scale, seeing if it's really interacted with well. We haven't talked much about natural materials. There's a session a little bit later this afternoon where we'll be talking about nature play. But, you know, really working to bring the natural environment, like things like seed pods, twigs, natural materials that are manipulable for small hands are also kind of a low cost way to activate a space that otherwise wouldn't be very playful. And you don't need a ton of work. There's pretty low barrier to entry for doing that too. And I'm seeing we do have another note. Thank you so much, Ingrid. Do we have any case studies from rural areas? I love this note. I wish we did have some case studies from rural areas. We don't, but we do have some exciting opportunities coming up in the next year or so, where we're going to be partnering with the Colorado Health Foundation in a couple of communities. So I think if you re-ask that question or keep an eye on our website in the next few months, we should have some insight into kind of what's the state of play in one specific more rural area in the state of Colorado, and then hopefully we'll be able to do more from there. All right. I'm seeing no other comments at the moment. We're really grateful that we got to spend some of our afternoon with you. So I think we'll just probably close out here just a couple minutes early. Be asking for you to join us. You know, we've got a lot of commitment represented here with the organizations that stand behind LaDeja, Lynette, and me, who are just trying to say, how do we give our kids the best possible world that we can? And we're so grateful that you showed interest in joining us for this session. Hope that that interest extends to how you think about kind of building spaces for kids in your own community. So much gratitude. Oh, I'm seeing a question come in. So I'll say I do want to wrap up my thought as just a lot of gratitude for you for attending, and hope that you'll be in touch with us and thinking about play in your own community. I do think it's good in the time that we have left to take this question, and thanks Ashley for sending it. So the question from Ashley is, in any of the space improvements, was there pushback from communities who did not want to have a space in their neighborhood, either attracting added attention or attracting added traffic? I think that's a really good question. I don't know. Did you hear anything like that from your community, LaDeja, Lynette? I don't feel like I've heard.
So not specifically regarding the playground, but the comment that I made about schools keeping in mind the importance of creating programs to the that meet high expectations versus the what ifs, right? So when you have ideas about setting up classrooms outside or recess, you're going to get a lot of feedback around, well, is it safe enough? Is so much going on in the community? The homeless people, or in some instances, individuals who are on drugs or in the streets, how they would use them in the night. And so those type of mindsets limit what else you can bring to your school and keeps you kind of caged in. So as far as the playground goes, there was not a lot of pushback on what we could not do. And I think that is in combination because one, people tend not to push back when it's like directly all about kids. Like anybody, it's like, no, don't build a playground, red flag. They probably shouldn't be a part of your group. But the other thing that I think is key is that as the leader, whether you are the principal or the person leading the program or the partnership, it's very important for you to be very clear about your expectations. And while you want to be flexible and get other ideas, you got to know when to bend and when to hold, because everybody sees their vision from their seat, but the leader sees the vision in its entirety. And so, no, we didn't have specific pushback for the playground, but there has been conversations around what else could happen because of the environment that we live in, that we work in. And I just keep continuing to push the idea that, no, you create programs at the highest expectation and you make people rise to that level, or you crawl with them, and you have to decide what you want to do.
And I think that is exactly on point, Principal Ballard. I think that for most of our playground projects, there's never pushback on playgrounds, but if there are other projects related to outdoor learning spaces in certain communities, there's always this concern about what's happening to those spaces before school hours, after school hours, and how safe those spaces are. And so a lot of times, one of the ways that we respond from the operations seat that I sit in is saying, how do we, bring more lighting to spaces? How do we treat furniture? Some of those different things like that, so that we're addressing some of those larger community concerns around the spaces. But for playgrounds, we don't really get a lot of pushback at all.
Yeah, and I see we have another question from Megan, so I'll just briefly add to LaDeja and Lynette's comments to Ashley's question, which was a great question. And I would say, I do think in most of these instances for this partnership, there was equipment in place that was outdated and in need of replacement. So it wasn't taking, a vacant lot and then transitioning that into a play space. It was kind of taking something that wasn't working well for the needs of the kids in the broader school community and transforming into something that does work well. So that might kind of contribute also to not seeing as much pushback. I would say not in this partnership, but in other projects that we've worked on, where you do have something like a vacant lot that might be in a residential area. I know we as an organization have seen some pushback related to traffic or maybe concerns about, just attracting attention. And typically through the community engagement process, where you really do have a lot of open forums for people to participate in, there's a way to understand, I think, some of the types of things that Lynette was raising up as operational considerations, right? Are there traffic calming measures that need to be put in place? Does the scope of the project kind of need to focus on where on the site things can go, or what type of equipment is going to be most sustainable in that space? So I think it's not easy, but a really intensive and engaged effort to have as many possible people at the table for design can help with pushback if the location maybe does generate some of that. And we do have another question here that's specifically to LaDeja from Megan about experiencing any of those problems, like people who are unhoused who are using the space.
Definitely. However, that, as unfortunate as it is, it doesn't have anything to do with the actual space in itself. The way our building is structured, we have like this awning over both sides of our building. And so there are times where homeless individuals will come to rest there, to get out of the rain. Sometimes you find them on the playground. And so because we know that these are some of the challenges that we will deal with as a school community, we put structures into place to respond to that. So, and there's also systems within Baltimore City as well. Like we expect the playground to be cleaned first thing in the morning. We have a security team that goes and assesses the grounds, make sure, no one's sleeping or posted up. We probably saw the worst experiences during the pandemic. There was a huge increase in the number of homeless individuals that were interacting with our space. But, unfortunately, it almost comes with the territory, but nothing as damaging in a sense where the playground has to be shut down or we can't use it. We try to keep our eye on it. And if we need to, do a better job at making sure it's cleaned up or making sure that we don't have any repairs that need to be updated. We do that on a daily basis, but some things we just can't control. And we've definitely seen it being used as a way to, for whatever reason, those individuals are using it. And we just do our best to respectfully let them know that that's not the space for it and move on.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong kind of illustration that it's a commitment to maintaining the space that kind of comes with putting it in place, that the district and schools have to embrace for this to really work well for the broader school community, right? If there's a need for that kind of overall support to the space in the morning, then that has to be in place for it to be successful. So thanks for talking us through that. And I think with that, we probably will bring this session to a close. We're so grateful to Ingrid and Megan and Ashley and Tamara and everybody anonymous who shared your questions and your thoughts with us, and to everyone who has shared a portion of your afternoon with us, and to the conference as a whole for giving us the chance to talk to you a bit about our work. So with that, just want to end with a lot of gratitude. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to LaDeja, to Lynette for talking about the work that we've done together and for your incredible efforts for Baltimore's kids to give them the best, most playful environment possible. And everyone have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Take care, everyone.